Hello, sports fans. It's Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. Welcome to Cleats by Dre. Dre, let's talk some sports. Well, gang, we went into the weekend with a big bucket of believe with those New York Mets, and we're still riding. We're still believing. Two action-packed roller coastery games to kick off their series with the Phillies, and it's 1-1 heading back to Queens for Game 3 Tuesday night. For this episode, I follow the advice of noted Chinese military general, strategist, and philosopher Sun Tzu. Know thy enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles, you'll never be defeated. Well, Mr. Tzu, I only have 2 more battles I need to win in this series. Nonetheless, I invited my former classmate and diehard Philly fan, Chris, onto the pod to break down this series. It was tough to invite in the Phillies fan, invite in the enemy, but it was necessary. He talked about how this season all along has been World Series of bust for the Phils, which has set up quite an angstful stage for this series to play out. Before we get to that conversation, lots of other game action going on from our teams. And I'll go from order of which team has been the least surprising lately versus the most surprising to give you very quick kind of recaps. We'll go Liberty, Yanks, Jets, and Giants. First, our New York Liberty, the WNBA. They took care of business versus those Las Vegas Aces, winning their series in 4 games. Not surprising because the Liberty were the better team all year. And not surprising because the Aces took Game 3, right? Backs against the wall, champions, had to win. But the Liberty, the better team, won 76-62 in Game 4 to close out the 2-time champs. Really interesting quotes from Vegas Aces coach Becky Hammond after this series, even during the series. Quote from her: "It's the beautiful thing about sports, actually. The work and the commitment and the buy-in and the play hard and the want to and the will always show up in the end." Chelsea Gray of the Aces said they could have folded a lot earlier. Look, I didn't follow a lot of WNBA this year. But apparently a lot of drama in this pursuit for the 3rd ring for the Aces. And it's just interesting how this comes out. And it really sounds like Liberty might have broken up the Aces. They might not be coming back. But about the Liberty, they're looking ahead. They're going to be in the finals. Now, it could be the Lynx or the Sun. Their Game 5 is tomorrow. And interesting for the Liberty, right? They haven't suffered back-to-back losses since late May. That's a good sign for a playoff contender. A name to pay attention to in the Liberty, Leonie Fibek, 6'4", defensive stalwart, recently inserted to the starting lineup. She led the team with a plus-minus of 28, plus 28 in that clinching game versus the Aces. That was the highest among the team. So, team rounded into form. New York fans, tune in now. You got a favorite in the finals. Okay, to the Yankees. So first, an ugly kind of 6-5 win on Saturday versus the Royals in their Game 1. And then tonight, Monday night, a 4-2 loss to the Royals. What's going on with them? It's 1-1. I mean, all the division series are 1-1. Yankees have had some really uninspiring starting pitching performances from Cole and Rodon. Weak hitting. Were the Royals lucky, as Chaz Chisholm said post-game? You don't want to say that kind of stuff, Jazz. You don't need any other reason to get the other team more motivated. Look, with the Yankees, we knew the lineup wasn't very long. We talked about that in July. But do they have to get more out of New York's other Aaron, Mr. Judge? See, we looked at all 104 hitters in MLB history with greater than 200 postseason at-bats. We did a Cleats by Dre original analysis. Of all 104 hitters with that many at-bats, Judge actually middle of the pack. He sits 50th in weighted runs created plus. That's one of those metrics that just combines a lot of good things that come to creating runs, whether it's getting on base, whether it's moving runners, base running, and the plus indicates against their era, because we're going to compare against eras. 50th. So, I mean, the stats would have you say he's the worst postseason hitter ever. Still 50th. Gets on base, has hit some home runs. Do you know who was 62nd? How about Jolton Joe DiMaggio? 80th, Mookie Betts, who's currently in an 0 for 22 slump for those Dodgers who are struggling too. 90th at 104, Jimmy Rollins. You see him on TBS, World Series winner. 94th, Tino Martinez. Wow, we thought he was a clutch performer, right? 96th, Robinson Cano of the Yankees. So I say cool it on the Judge criticism. A-Rod, right, had the same rhetoric until he had an epic 2009. The reality with playoff baseball is that, yes, the pitchers are better. The teams are good. Now, the Yankees could very well be going home in this series against Kansas City. But there will be more reasons that happens than just Aaron. So, this is the guy you want in there. Playoff baseball's tough. These games can go either way. Let's see what happens when they move the series back to Kansas City. Let's go to the New York Jets. God, they've been tough to watch the last 2 weeks, huh? After a 10-9 loss to the Denver Broncos, now a 23-17 loss to the Vikings in London, where the offense has just looked uninspiring. I mean, it was bad enough where my oldest son and I, we were getting our hair cut, and they had the game on at the barbershop, and even he realized, how all the men were grunting and groaning watching the Jets play. That's a metric, number of grunts and groans that younger 7-year-olds pick up on. But look, the Jets stand at 2-3, and I'm asking myself, was I way too overconfident about all my Jets futures when they were 2-1, coming off of wins over the now 0-4 Titans and 1-3 Patriots, with what we thought was a good loss to the now 2-3 49ers? I bought into the Rodgers hype in the offseason and all the other moves they made in the O-line and getting Mike Williams and so on. Should I have considered any more how old Rodgers was and how mediocre his last season playing with the Pack was? Or is this offense just needs more time still? Luckily, no one's run away with the division yet. Right? The Dolphins are hapless without Tua, and the Jets do have the 3-2 Bills next Monday night, who've lost 2 in a row. I'm not jumping ship yet. I know it's a long season and teams can still get hot. But especially given the lack of confidence in this coaching staff and how unproven they are, I'm monitoring this season quite closely week to week from now on for the Jets. And most surprising, the Giants. Honestly, I didn't watch a lick of their 29-20 win over the Seahawks. I was locked in on the Mets. But was I surprised they won after last week's oatmeal performance versus the Cowboys? Yeah. Credit where it's due. Dan Jones seemingly played well. 24 for 34, 257 yards, 2 TDs, no interceptions. He was running again. And per Jordan Renan of ESPN, Jones actually sits 12th in QBR this year, a rating that means something to me. That's ahead of Dak, Rodgers, Stafford, Mahomes, Goff. Since the Vikings game, he's been at minimum okay, and at times good. I didn't rewatch the game, but I trust someone like Dan Orlovsky of ESPN, who named him among the 6 quarterbacks whose tape was the best on Sunday. I also a lot of credit to Dable. The highlights I saw looked like the play action and the scheming that worked for the Giants 2 years ago. Tyrone Tracy, as a backup, seemingly ran well, right? 127 yards. Darius Slayton came through with yet another one of those games that remind you he can be a productive receiver. When we didn't have neighbors for this game, and the offensive line continues to be so solid. On defense, I was shocked when Jordan went on to inform me per ESPN stats and info, the Giants currently lead the NFL with 22 sacks. I think they had 7 versus Seahawks. This defense is getting an identity and a good one if it's about QB pressure. So good win for the Giants. I'll be happy to be proven wrong about them and for them to be competitive this year, as long as key building blocks show some growth. And for me, it's consistency too. Daniel's always shown flashes. He needs to do it over the course of a season. This team needs to do it over the course of a season before I really start getting excited. But nonetheless, a good win. Okay, enough of the recaps. Let me kick it to myself now for my interview with the enemy, with a Phillies fan, my good pal Chris. Enjoy. Okay, here on Cleats by Dre, we like to cover all angles of the games. Yes, we have our teams we mainly cover, the Mets being one of them. We also think it's fair and just to cover our team's combatants. So I consider myself quite lucky to be joined by a fan of the current Mets combatants in the National League Division Series, those fanatical Philadelphia Phillies. The series is tied 1-1 right now, and I'm joined here by my University of Notre Dame Mendoza College of Business former classmate, noted Phillies diehard Chris. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing well, Dre. Thank you for having me this fine evening. It's a great chance to chat some baseball with you.
Well, I baseball too, but I mean Notre Dame too. I mean it's a bye week for the Irish. Should
It
we?
was a great time to have a bye when the Phillies are playing in the playoffs. That's always a tough day when you have to figure out how do you watch a college football game and a Major League Baseball playoff game.
No, I told my wife like Saturdays, there's no Irish game, but our Mets and our Phillies filled it.
Yeah, yeah. I
Quite a good
will
one.
look back fondly on some of those Phillies playoff runs from like '08 to 12 and heading to a Notre Dame game at Notre Dame as an alumni and then leaving the game and heading to the linebacker lounge and watching the Phillies play up on the TV at the linebacker lounge while having a couple adult beverages there was always a blast.
Putting on a. Did you have that red Phillies suit thing that you sent me a picture of? Did you have that back then?
Yeah, I did
You
not
did.
have that back then.
No.
So as Andre has alluded to, I like to wear appropriate team attire. So a few years back, I purchased a Notre Dame tracksuit that I like to wear
Hmm.
at Notre Dame tracksuit games, the big game of the year. And then last year for the Phillies playoff run, I purchased a bright red suit. So I wear that to the Phillies playoff games. And this year, new to the attire, Andre, I got a velour Eagles tracksuit. So all tracksuits
Dude,
and for football, and then suits for baseball goes.
it really is a bright red. Is that the Phillies red? That kind of bright, like
Hey, my excuse is I'm colorblind. So yeah,
there
I
you
looked
go.
through Amazon and I figured something out. It looks good enough. I get compliments when I go into the game, man. Lots of people are like, "Nice suit, dude." So
Good
it's a
stuff.
blast.
Well, let's get into it. Let's qualify your fandom, right? So how long you been a Phillies fan? What's do you have a first memory of being a Phillies fan?
Yeah, so you hit on like not only a first memory, I think like one of my first core memories is the Phillies. So I remember 5 years old, my dad shared season tickets with a bunch of friends from work, and my mom had a bad back, and so she couldn't go to the game. So my dad was like, Chris, like you're young, like we'll take you to the game, as a 5 year old. And so I remember going to the game, Dre, and this was back in the days of Veterans Stadium where it was giant 80,000 foot
Hmm.
coliseum for both football and baseball, and we had seats behind home plate in the 500 level. And so there's these little dots of people running around, hard to remember. But there was one thing that got my attention at the Phillies game, and of course that is the big green Philly fanatic. And so one of my key memories was watching that game, and after like the sixth inning, my dad's like, "Hey, do you want to leave? Like, do you want to stay?" And my ask back to him was like, "Well, is the fanatic going to come out again?" And he said no. And I said, "All right, let's go home then." So I do admit that as a first time Phillies game, it didn't stay to the end. I do get my son now as a 6 year old Philly fan. He makes about the seventh, eighth inning, but I do give him a little bit of a grace period if he wanted to head out, and there's no fanatic entertainment. But yeah, so I've been a Phillies fan for 35 years plus,
Hmm.
and I've seen all the ups and downs of the
Hmm.
treacherous being a fan of a challenging team, just like the Mets.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean the like mascots, right? Mascots bring the kids in. And like we could probably debate their treachery, but like you just saying earlier on your 2008 to 2012 like playoff run, that had my blood going. I was jealous. Like, geez, I had like 5 years in a row where, my team won the World Series in one of them and had Roy Halladay pitch was it a perfect game or a no hitter that he pitched?
The no hitter, yeah,
No
that
hitter
was
still.
14
Um,
years ago, 2 days ago. Yep.
and it's just crazy the fact that what was the stat that our two teams have played over 1,000 times in the regular season and have never met in the playoffs.
Yeah, and but Dre, I feel like you're a stats guy. It's a little bit biased given the new playoff format's only been around for about 30 or so years, but I agree. It's made
Still.
for some I like kind of being able to play a division rival in the
Yeah.
playoffs. With the Braves the last 2 years, it's amped that up for the Phillies Braves
Hmm.
rivalry. This one's definitely amping up the Phillies Mets rivalry for sure. So it's not traditional, so to say, of the years of baseball past, but it's a lot of fun to see your rival in the playoffs more frequently.
Can we? Oh, we'll get deeper. I also want to understand Phillies and baseball. You mentioned Eagles, you mentioned Notre Dame. Where do your different areas of fandoms like rank, if you could rank them?
Yeah. So Phillies are way, way above anybody else. It's like Phillies,
Okay.
Notre Dame is below that, and Notre Dame used
Wow.
to be closer, but given the changes in college football and college sports, like it's just slowly dropped. And then Eagles are behind them, and then you can. I'm a fair weather Sixers and Flyers
Mhm.
fan. I'll kind of
Yeah.
follow the Sixers a little bit more because I like the trust the process and what they've been doing there with analytics and trying to kind of stack the team. It's kind of fun to watch a little bit. But the Flyers, I couldn't tell you a single player on there. So definitely Phillies above all. Like that's who I will watch, who I will live and die with from growing up watching them with my dad.
That says a lot because I mean you're a double domer, right? So folks that
I
don't
am,
know, right?
yes.
Chris
Mhm.
Chris went to undergrad and business school at Notre Dame, and that just speaks so much to the Phillies. Your
Yeah,
your 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 fanaticism.
it's a baseball thing. So I was a kid. I was 10 years old when the Phillies were the 1993 Philadelphia Phillies team. And
Ooh.
so that was the team that, if you have great memory, it was the team that went from worst to first. It
Hmm.
had a characters of players and John Kruk and Mickey Morandini. Kurt Schilling was on that team. And it was an incredible run. They had so many like memorable moments. And what the funny thing about that is, you say you don't get to, whenever you meet your childhood heroes, it's a little bit disappointing. Unfortunately, Darren Dalton, the catcher for that team, died of brain cancer,
Hmm.
like many other people
Hmm.
on that team because the vet was poisonous. Anyway,
Wait, hold on. Is that a real thing? The vet was
the
poisonous?
vet was poisonous. Yeah, the turf at the vet. There's a Philly Inquirer article around this, but there's been all these like conspiracy theories around how many players from the Phillies have gotten brain cancer. Um,
Jesus.
yeah, David West, Darren Dalton. Um, oh, I'm going to draw a blank on a couple
Does
others.
it
There's like
does it go to the Eagles too? Does it go like cross sport?
not as much. You don't play 81 games in football, and you don't play in 110 degrees on
True.
the this turf. So,
Wow.
anyway, back to Darren
No,
Dalton
I'm
though.
fascinated, but yeah,
It's a
back to
fascinating
the
like
stuff at
that is
hand.
a rabbit hole and a
Yeah, we'll
conspiracy
do a
theory.
separate. We'll do a serial type sports
Oh yeah,
podcast on
that would
that.
be a great one. But anyway, we my friends and I, the Darren Dalton Foundation, they raise money for brain cancer, so we go every year to their celebrity bartending thing. So here I am as a guy in his late 30s, and I go and I'm like a little kid in a candy shop meeting like Mickey Morandini and Jim Eisenreich and John Kruk and Kurt Schilling that I watched as a 10-year-old kid when they went through that crazy playoff run and lost the Joe Carter home run
Yeah,
in the Blue
yeah.
Jays.
And I think of Lenny Dykstra, right, former Met,
Yeah,
and that team, and what Mitch Williams was the
he was the
closer,
closer.
right?
Yep.
Wild thing.
Wild thing number 99.
And you
Yeah.
guys did you beat the Braves in the NLCS that year?
Yeah. So that was the Braves series in the NLCS.
Yeah.
It was the first game, Kim Batista. I went with my dad. NLCS, we had tickets again, top level, Vet Stadium, third base side. Ninth inning of that game, Kim Batista comes in as a defensive replacement for third base, throws the ball away, gives away a run from the tied up. It goes into the 10th, and Kim Batista comes up and hits the single to win the game. So another like fond, crazy memory. So this past weekend kind of evoked a lot of memories of that team too. That was against the Braves, and that was the last time that they played just the West and the East
Yeah.
in the playoffs. It was in '93 before the strike in '94.
Braves are the West, right? Braves are the West.
Yep.
And that has me thinking too, because I know we were talking about the Mets and the Phillies never having met in the playoffs, but you know, the teams have never really been good at the same time. Is a lot of the problem too. And so, given you've had those matchups with the Braves, like where do you rank the Mets on your list of rivals for the Phillies?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like with the Mets and the Braves, the rivalry against them kind of ebbs and flows, and if they can get good at the same time, it's been different. So I would say like in the '06 to '08 time frame, the Mets and the Phillies had a great
That was a
rivalry.
big one. That
I
was
mean,
big.
Jimmy Rollins in '07, despite the Mets being leaps and bounds better on paper, coming out and saying we're the team to beat, and the Phillies pushing, I think it was 7 games back with 17 to
Oh
play
God, I didn't realize we
against
were
the
gonna
Mets.
get to that.
Sorry, listeners that are Mets fans, but the Phillies
Oh
came back and won that
Jesus.
in the last game of the year, and we're scoreboard watching. So that I think was like, but that was a rivalry on and off the field, and obviously like Chase Utley versus the Mets, like he's always the villain number one for the Mets, both when he was on the Phillies and the Dodgers.
Yep.
So I think the rivalry is there. I'd say it's probably neck and neck with the Braves. And some years the Braves are a bigger rival, some years the Mets. I think honestly the proximity though overall, the Mets are probably from geographic proximity. The Mets are probably the biggest Phillies
Mm-hmm.
rival, I'd say, just from being able to play, having people come down from New York to the games. We go up there. It's a blast to kind of see Mets and Phillies fans get after it after a game every so often.
So this is fun because I want to do this episode because I wanted to show like openness and learning about the other side of fandom. And just hearing Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley, it's like making my blood boil. Where like I want to win even more now this series. And
Yeah,
like, what did I think going into this Mets and Phillies? And yeah, those '06, '07, let's say '07 and '08. I mean, the Phillies,
yeah,
that Mets team was set up
they were
for a
good.
run, and the Phillies just took it from them.
Yeah, and before, I mean, it was. I feel like the NL East has been dominated for years past. If you saw the Braves through the
Yeah,
'90s, the early
totally.
2000s, and then the Mets kind of took over, then the Phillies took over, and then we had the downfall. Flopped around for a little bit, and then the Braves had the stronghold on the division until this past year. And who knows like what the future of the division is going to be. I think that all three of the teams are kind of evenly matched. And it just becomes a little bit of like who's streaky, who players have great years. I think now at this point, we're not going to see like a five-peat. I think for a long time in this division.
Yeah, I mean that would make for great ball, definitely. Um, Focusing more on the Phillies a little bit. Coming off two really strong playoff runs, what was the sentiment from the fans coming into this year? And
Yeah,
just how has it been? Because you've had that success, hunger for more. Like what's the sentiment?
it was a World Series or bust kind of a year for us. All
World
talk
Series championship?
championship or bust. Yeah, like I mean, this team's window is starting to close. Our players are getting into their 30s now. We've got big money committed into them. And so even in March, like we didn't make a lot of changes in the team structure. So coming into this year, we felt like last year we kind of just got cold for 2 games and that was it. We were so close. And I think that if we had made it to the World Series, we would have won that series. So team like the city believes anything but a World Series championship is a failure. So, the goal this year was get off to a hot start. We haven't had that in the last few seasons. We did it. We got off to being the best team in baseball. And then, the dog days of summer came and we went cold and it scared the bejesus out of the whole city. Everybody's nervous. Everybody got tight. Everybody's thinking what's going to be like the '64 Mets that collapsed after 16 games. I think they were down by 6. It was like the Mets of '07,
Hmm.
and they blew the lead and didn't make the World Series that year. So we all had that fear, and then they made the playoffs, and I think Game 1 like started to bring back that fear that the bats were going to go cold. So the whole city was World Series or bust this year. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, and it felt like we were kind of on the precipice of not having that happen or not having a chance for it early in the series.
Yeah, and Mets have had a roller coaster of a year. Started really slow, and the Phillies have kind of gone wire to wire. And I mean, I wonder if you've learned anything from like those 2022 Phillies who they were third place the whole year, right? It was
Yeah,
the
I
Mets and
mean,
the Braves, and the Mets collapsed, and the Braves caught them. And there's something I think about that team that's just kind of like sitting under the radar, but also is fighting every day, like fighting
yeah,
while, those teams at the top, like they're, especially in baseball, dog days of summer, every day you're out there. Like it's just interesting how Phillies are flipped from that, right? You're
yeah.
going as the favorites. You haven't really had to play a meaningful game 4 months. I
Wow,
don't
yeah.
all season.
I think that the thing about baseball's kind of turned a little bit more like the NBA. It's like the season's mattering a little less, and so it's about getting hot at the end of the year. And so the Mets this year, the Phillies in 22, the Nats in 19, like getting hot, getting in, playing meaningful baseball for the weeks leading up. And the 22 Phillies, they were on the road just like the Mets this year. They went on the road, I think, the 15th of September, and they came back like the 5th of October. And so I see a lot of parallels between that team and this team. It's also, I think, a mentality that you're playing with house money and the expectations are low. So anything you do is all upside. The expectations aren't there. The pressure is not there. And that 2022 Phillies, I mean, it was lightning in a ball. They played with house money. I
Mm.
went to 5 or 6 playoff games that year, and it was the coolest sporting events that I've ever been to.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that the Mets, like, if they can get back to Citi Field, or when they're going back to Citi Field tomorrow, it will be a warm homecoming for them if they can stay ahead. If they get behind, then everything starts to change with that home field advantage. So as a Phillies fan, like I'm not looking forward to it, but we'll see how the game plays out.
So just playing off of that, you mentioned the ballpark part, and you were in the
Yeah.
ballpark for game one. Is is there still, and look, we can talk about game one, right? Wheeler dominated for 7 innings, was it? Then
Pitch
your
seven. Yep.
your bullpen just let it up. Was it a different vibe like throughout the game than it was 2 years ago? Like was it still that fun kind of
Yeah.
vibe or more tense, more?
So the way that like the vibe of 2022 was just we had not been in the playoffs for 11 years. And so it was getting back
That's
into the playoffs
11 years.
11
That's
years. And like
right.
with all the
That's
expansion, and
right.
there were some real
Yeah.
bad years in there. So we get back in the playoffs and we split with the Braves. Me and my two buddies, we go to the ballpark. We have nosebleed seats that we paid a fortune for, and we're watching the game, and everybody's just screaming. It's a 2 o'clock game. Everybody's drinking early.
Wait, you talking
People
about this year or 22?
2022.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the place erupts when Reese Hoskins hits the long drive home run to left field to kind of open up the ball game. It's just a party scene from there on. And that was that environment all of 2022. Whenever they got ahead, it was just an environment you couldn't get back into the game if you're the away team. So 2023, like similar, if they were ahead, they could win. And then last Saturday's game, it felt like 2022 for about 20 minutes, where Wheeler, mows down the top three. I think he threw like 11 pitches, all for strikes, something
Oh
like
yeah.
that. Schwarber gets up and crushes a
Bomb.
400 plus
Yep.
foot home run. Place goes wild. Then Turner gets on base, and we're like, all right, we got to get some more runs. And we didn't. And you could feel everybody get a little tight. Like,
Mm-hmm.
are the bats back, or are we just
Mm-hmm.
lucky on that first at
Mm-hmm.
bat? And so you normally like to see, the offense play, and that's what you want to sit in your seat for. And you kind of, if you got to get a hot dog or use the bathroom, you kind of run out when your team's pitching.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the opposite of a game, but everybody was getting tight. And Wheeler came out, and I was like, all right, we got to get, 6 more outs. We got a great bullpen. And then the bullpen came in and just scuffed it up. And it was just disappointing. It was deflating. I mean, it was embarrassing that people were leaving early from the game. And of course, like the Mets fans then started to
Sure.
arise and kind of show up at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
game. People are arguing, chirping back and forth at each other. So the vibe was very different. And I think also the players felt that because their expectations are so high that they, feel it from the crowd, and the crowd is letting them know that expectations are so high. So it's definitely different from 2022 when it was like everything was all upside. Everybody was, partying the whole time for whatever was occurring on the field.
Um, I think I made a note too. When you mentioned Reese Hoskins' name, I gotta I might do a beep, like I might blurt out. I'm gonna go back and blurt out the Utley name, the Rawlings. I'm gonna blurt those, because I almost curse words here in New York. It's triggering me.
Yeah, Reese Hoskins, he just runs around the base
Again,
real
blurt.
slow.
We're gonna blurt that out because he's
Yeah,
done.
after you throw it to
Brewers
somebody
are
in the head,
done.
it only takes 33 seconds to run around the bases. So
Brewers
yeah,
are done. The bullpen. So if we're gonna get into games a little bit, game one, I know how good the Phillies bullpen has been. I had a number of the relievers in fantasy this year. So
yeah,
how surprising was that? What did you think about? And really, we could extend it to game two now, right?
yeah. So
Strom getting hit in the second game.
I mean, they got like a six-headed monster in the bullpen now with what they have. And Thompson has always been Rob Thompson, their manager, has
Yeah.
always been uh,
Topper, call him Topper.
Topper. Yeah, Topper. He's got a hot hand. He kind of has a plan that's a little different than a lot of managers that he sets people up in the beginning of the game to basically like, here are your guys that you're going to go after. So, that was the plan going in, it sounded like, and they just didn't execute, it felt like. I didn't rewatch the game. I wasn't sure if it was
Yeah.
control or if it was velocity or what. But it felt like once they got into that, seventh inning or eighth inning in that first game, the bullpen just fell apart. I think once they got behind, they just couldn't catch up and everybody had a bad day. So that was game one. And then
Mhm.
game two, we all kind of knew going into that game that Sanchez wasn't going to throw 7 innings. We were like, all right, he can throw five, he can throw 6 innings. That's great. And so I think he threw 5 innings on like 88 pitches, something like
Mhm.
that. And then it went to the bullpen, and I would say that they played fair, and did fine. And that's all that you can expect. But the bats were around, so it kept the game tight.
What we got to
Uh,
do? So we got to do. So the bullpen let up 4 runs in 4 innings after Sanchez.
yeah.
So I guess Ruiz was a question. I don't think he's one of your better relievers in the
Now
sixth.
Ruiz is
He's
like
a
the sixth best arm. So he came in when we were down by three. So he comes in, we're down by three, and I think he pushes or he
yeah.
gives up. I think he pushes and doesn't give up anything.
Mhm.
Then so that was the sixth inning. The seventh inning, I think Kirkering came in. The eighth inning was Estevez, and then the ninth inning was
Strom.
Strom. So they kind of used Ruiz as a filler guy, not to try to burn everybody's arms out because Kirkering, Strom pitched the day before, and they were trying to get some relief there. So it was surprising that they gave up 4 and 4 innings.
Yeah.
I think the big difference though, like a lot of these guys in the regular season, they're not pitching against the top five teams. Like we're down to the top crop of baseball.
That's true.
Pressure's on, and hitters are going to hit. So it's a lot harder environment, and those numbers about the season, like they get less inflated when you
It's
get to
true.
playoff baseball.
That's a
You're
good
playing
point.
better
And then you
competition.
look around baseball today. For the Guardians, Clase gave a three-run
Yeah,
homer to the Tigers. Josh Hader got beat up in the last series. I mean, Diaz got hit in game two, so there's something
yeah,
to be said for that. I'm curious though, because the Mets have had such a almost a metamorphosis throughout the year. Like how familiar coming into this series were you what like these Mets were compared to the 2022 Mets, who were like a front running team and
yeah.
flawed in a lot of ways, a lot of the same players, but like anything surprised you, I guess, as you saw
So
them.
I have an ongoing bet annually with my neighbor who's a Mets fan,
Hmm,
and it is
I
whoever
like this
wins
guy.
the
Yeah.
season series or goes the farthest in the playoffs has to take the other guy out for beers and dinner one night, and we usually go for like a college football game or something.
Ooh.
So like we rib each other throughout the season. Like we kind of followed a little bit. But this year, like I kind of saw the Grimace thing happen. I was like, man, Grimace, damn, like Grimace, look at them. Like Grimace is getting you on a run streak.
Hmm.
And then they went, I think 6-0 after Grimace or something like
Hmm.
that. And then all of a sudden, the next like 3 weeks later, Hawk Tua shows up and throws out a pitch. And like, Dan, what are you guys doing? Like, you're starting to Mets it again.
Big Mets
I'm
fan.
teasing about it, but their
Andy
record
Welch.
stayed well, stayed high. So they played really good ball in the after the London series against the Phillies. I think they had the best record in baseball since then.
Yeah.
So I follow them to like the hey, here's how they're doing, how they're trending. And I started listening to your podcast, and I was like, yeah, when you started calling early, like, congrats to you. You said they're going to be ahead of the Braves, and you called it. I think that was your first podcast, and I was like, that's a bold call, but
First
Dre's
week.
got it
Yeah,
right.
first week or
First week.
first month. First month. Yeah.
Congrats there. So I think that I followed them to the point where like, how are they trending? I didn't know the players.
Yeah.
Like I know Lindor, and I know Alonso, but I didn't follow like all their the fact that their number one starter was out. New Diaz was back this year, but it was not. I'm not a fantasy baseball player, so I don't know the
Mm.
starting lineups for every team. So yeah, it was watching them kind of make the playoffs. That Monday doubleheader was fascinating to watch. I was following it
Crazy.
intensely. And then the Brewer series, I was following it on Gamecast, and just there are a lot of names that all of a sudden I'm like, who is this guy? And so it is kind of reminiscent more of like a 93 Phillies team for me of like, who are
Hmm.
these guys all of a sudden coming out
Hmm.
of the woodworks and playing really good baseball?
Do you know the name of the third baseman now?
Vientos.
Oh, say that like you don't. Yeah, Mark Vientos.
Yeah.
2 home runs and a double in the last game. So, but this, I mean, when he came up in May, in middle of May was about when they made the run, right? They put Lindor
Yeah.
in the number one spot, which he's been MVP caliber since then.
Yeah.
Um, Alonso hasn't had his best year, but he's been okay. Nimmo, not his best year, but he's been okay. You called out Grimace and Hawk Tua, but you missed the OMG. You missed the we have an international pop star now doing collabs with Pitbull, but he's been hitting the hell out of the ball, Iglesias. I don't know where this
Yeah.
came from.
That's
Hitting the hell out of the
I
ball.
I did not know about him until the playoffs, and I kept seeing all these OMGs all over the place. Again, neighbor Dan informed me about this like pop star thing. I'm like, this is a side hustle playing baseball, basically.
Dude, the
So
Mets took I know Red October for the Phillies. I know Rally Monkey from the Angels in the early 2000s. I
yeah.
know Baby Shark from the Nats in 2019.
Oh, that was the worst.
Mets fans all year have like there's like 5 or 6 of these things. And
Hmm.
I kind of feel like we're over memed at this point to make up a word. Maybe it works. Maybe it's just too much. I don't know. But something always has to catch. Like something has to there's something bigger than just like the X's and O's on the field that drives teams, I think, to greater heights.
And that's what makes baseball like so fun. It's such a long season that you need to have like the local Phillies sports talk radio call. He does it like the bits of the team. And so, the Phillies, they have the daycare club that's like these two young guys and they pour, water on them when they're doing their post game interview after every game.
Wait, what
You
is
have,
it? After every game, they pour water on somebody?
yeah, the guy that gets interviewed by the TV, he's got his headphones on. He's talking to
Oh,
the newscaster about like they walk off,
they pour water on them. Got it.
single, and they walk around and they throw water on, or the third sunflower seeds. It's just a joke, but it's the kind of thing that keeps the team light. And when you
Mhm.
have that throughout a season, one, it creates a lot of camaraderie. I mean, this Phillies team, they have like family nights together on the off days, and like the wives and the kids are all at somebody's house having dinner and sharing like that. That's cool, and like that makes you
Yeah,
want to follow the team more. And so I think the Mets, they've had a couple of those this year for sure. And it makes a team for the fans be more likable because
yeah,
there's something else to follow, not just the strategy of the game, but the average everyday fan can be like, oh, there's this grimace run or the OMG thing or this young hitter that came up, in May and has been really good. So I love it when you see teams that have something else around it. I think it happens more in baseball than in other sports because it's just a longer season that you can have that.
yeah.
But it's been fun to kind of see that with the Phillies the last few years. The Mets this year, they have their bits as well.
Um, and I'll say like I was rooting for the Phillies last year against the Braves in the playoffs because I there's something likable about the Phillies players on this team. There is like, they have that song they sing in the locker room. I think I saw them after they beat the Braves. I think they were out partying like at the
Yeah,
what's the big
dancing on
bar
my
like?
own, my friend.
What's
Uh,
that bar called?
yeah, it's called Xfinity Live, and
Yeah. And they
so
were just all out there like just singing like that's fun. I'm
it's
not supposed to like them, but it's fun.
it is like they started that in 2022. Literally across the street from Citizens Bank Park, they have this bar center.
Right.
Uh, and what happened was the players started going there after the games and they get up on the balcony and they, start singing their songs and yelling at fans and throwing beers down. And it just created this connection. And then it became the hottest ticket to try to get in there after a game after they clinched a series. You'd have to, leave the game early to try to get in there to see them afterwards. But
Yeah.
yeah, they connected with the city well and they definitely have a little bit of like a Philly attitude. And Bryce Harper, he love him, hate him, but he is a showman. He's not like the traditional baseball player that I grew up with, but he is a great player. He uh, has a Philly heart, I think, in a lot of ways. He sometimes people claim that he panders to Philadelphia. I mean, heck, he said after the game last night like Rocky would be proud of this team,
Oh God.
and I was like,
That was
oh man,
funny.
like it's a little corny there, man, but I
It
get
is.
it. And the Philly community loves it. Like they don't rip on him for it like they would for like Nick Sirianni. If he said something like that, like he'd be driven out of the city right now as the Eagles head coach. So yeah, I mean they've got a cool personality right now. The city loves them, and it doesn't hurt that they're all like young guys that are having fun
Yeah.
with each other too. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. No, it's true. To get into some of the game a bit more. So I had some stats on Vientos, right? Because
Yeah,
since his May 15th call up, 26 home runs, 69 RBIs. That's third among all third basemen in home runs, fourth in RBIs, and his 510 slugging percentage is fifth. So it's the kind of guy that like under the radar, but and I gave Wainwright credit on the call. He was saying that, because I think Brzezinski was like bunt with Vientos. I was like, no, Vientos been our best hitter. Lindor aside, been our best consistent hitter. Um, but then the thing was really interesting to me in game one with it, not game two was all the Mets hitting home runs, which they've been doing all
Yep.
year. But game one was all singles. And that
Small
eighth
ball.
inning
Yeah.
and in the Brewers series until Alonso's home run, all singles. And I think there's been a little change in the Mets like hitting approach.
Yeah.
And I think in the playoffs, I think you win with avoiding strikeouts. You win with putting the ball in play, stringing together. I think the Mets had a run of eight straight guys reach base in the eighth. And
Yep.
maybe that's where like the Phillies pitchers, right? Hard, hard throwers, not used, don't give up home runs, but all the contact, it just kind of they strung it together. I think long lineups kind of win in the postseason.
It was death by a thousand paper cuts in that game, and it was single, single, single. And my buddy and I, we go back and forth about like we missed the days of small ball, and it was a small ball game on Saturday where they won it. They scored a lot of runs, but they did it all with little hits and just putting the ball
Hmm.
in play. And I
Hmm.
think that's that's been the Mets of the playoffs. Like they capitalize
Yeah.
when the other team makes a mistake. You make an error, they're going to get to second. They're
Yeah.
going to take advantage of every mistake that they can. So yeah, that game was death by a thousand paper cuts with singles, and then yesterday's game on Sunday was just home run, home run, home run,
Yeah.
and dramatics all over the
Big
place.
time. I mean, they're big time games. It makes me excited for the next few games. Next few could be a next couple. Could be
Two or
two, could be
three.
three. But yeah, yesterday's game was just a back and forth battle. It was a lot of fun. Um,
Took
going back
five
to
years off
New,
my life, man. I don't know about you, but
dude.
I
Well,
feel like
shoot, see, that's the thing. Like, welcome to the playoffs, Phillies.
yeah,
Saturday. The Mets have been in the playoffs since August.
yeah,
They had a 12% playoff odds at the end of August. Like every game. And honestly, this last week's it has to be the wildest week, maybe in Mets. I don't know. I Mets history. I don't know. I don't go far too back far enough. Right, I'm doing hyperbole, but that Monday doubleheader with the Braves and then the Brewers series was nuts. It's been nuts. So I maybe it gets more nuts. We'll see. I mean, the team hasn't been home in a couple weeks. Last time they were home was against the Phillies, and that when
yeah,
when they beat Wheeler. First time they beat Wheeler.
yep,
And it's got a little bit of that, like the Mets have a little bit to me, switching sports, those Giants in 07, 08 when they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. They ended the
you went
year.
to.
They were like second or third place in their division. They beat the Pats. They almost beat the Pats the last game of the year. So my thing is like we played you guys seven times in the last 2 weeks and played
Yeah,
you pretty well. We should have won that first series, but I think Diaz blew one. The bullpen blew a couple.
yeah, it
Lindor
was a
got
walk
hurt.
off by JT on a Sunday game, and then you
Yeah.
guys lost this. You won the first game. We won. Mets won first. We won the next two by
And
bullpen
Guys like
runs.
Cal
So
Stevenson was like hitting walk-offs and stuff and like
Al Stevenson made a game-winning
free
catch
catch.
into the
Yeah.
fence, I think, for one of them. Yeah, it was like again like no namers coming out of the middle of nowhere, and Buddy, what was Buddy's last name? Buddy was hitting the ball.
I don't even know who these guys,
Yeah,
but like it's a very competitive nature, so it's been an
yeah,
awesome series. I think it's going to be incredible games. I mean, the City Field crowd is going to be pumped, but the Phillies guys, they're battle tested. They're going to come ready too.
yeah,
Um, let's hit. All right, looking ahead, right? And I put these questions out there. We could do it any which
yeah.
way. I said the Phillies win the series if the Phillies lose the series if. I'll do the same for the Mets. They win if.
Sure.
What do you need to see? What's a critical kind of point?
All right. So the Phillies will win the series if they can keep having good plate discipline.
Hmm,
I mean, you saw it yesterday in the game. Nick Castellanos, I mean,
big.
swinging outside and everything in the beginning,
You guys
getting
booed him. Everybody booed
booed
him.
him. Hey, booing works, man.
It worked.
Turned it around. He may have said a four
His
letter
son was in
word.
the stands. His son
His
was,
son was
front and
Liam's in the
center.
stands in the front row. We all love Liam. He's a great kid.
I'm
Heck,
sure.
he goes and parties at Xfinity after they win too.
Just boo his
Uh,
dad.
but anyway, he gets booed because he's outside the place discipline. he on camera, I don't know if you saw it, he said something like, I freaking, these freaking people,
Yeah.
like caught it. And then he goes up and he hits a home run the next at bat, and then he hits the game winning walk off.
Such a
So
sick
plate discipline,
relationship.
like if they
Such a sick
can,
relationship you have with the
yeah,
fans and the players.
you got to know how to motivate them. Sometimes it takes a little boo bird. So I think plate discipline will be part of it. I think the second thing, if the Phillies win, it'll be because their bullpen shows up like their bullpen. They gotta be stronger than they've been over the last few games, and they got to hit their spots. Their command seem a little bit off too. I think the other thing that will, help the Phillies win the series, that if they win it, it'll be like the Mets metting it a little bit. The Mets have been this team for the Phillies
Oh,
that, that we
screw
call it
you.
metting it.
I'm gonna
I know
cut that
I'm
part.
hitting a little
The
bit of
Mets,
a
you made
sore
Mets a
spot there.
verb.
Mets metting it, yeah, where they fall apart. It happened in
Not this
'07.
team. Not this
It
team.
happened 2 years ago where they made the division round and they got swept, I think it was in the first round. So like there's a little bit of that, like, how is the other team going to show up? And I could see them kind of hitting the end of the rope of luck. That's the three things that I think will help the Phillies win it. If they lose the series, it's the Mets magic just keeps on coming. Like I think that they have some more magic in them. And I think it's also if the Phillies don't play good situational baseball. They've had issues with running the bases. They get really aggressive and they get thrown out. And if that happens, like they just lose more opportunities. So two things there is if that magic keeps happening, I think if the Phillies stop playing good situational baseball and the Mets capitalize on that.
See, I think I had to do a quick lookup of all-time MLB win-loss records in order for the
Yeah.
Mets to get that verb. So the Mets are 20th with a
Yep.
483 win percentage, and the Phillies are 27th with 474 win percentage. So the worst teams in the history of baseball go Marlins, Rockies, Padres, Phillies. So that's a Philly. The verb for screwing up a series is Phillies. We'll establish that.
They're
Um,
filling it.
just
Now
yeah,
we call it
jokes
men.
aside, my thing. I mean, good points. Bullpen obviously, situational hitting, avoiding the mistakes. I think for me, it comes down to 5 to 9 in the order because I think both teams, they're top. I mean, the Phillies certainly top three. They're awesome.
Yep.
I looked up stats on Harper. Um, I mean, at his postseason credentials at this point,
Unreal.
327, 12 home runs, 1171 OPS in 32 postseason games with the Phillies. I looked up because I was trying to think, is he on the verge of being the best postseason hitter in history,
Number
right?
three.
What's number three
Harper is. He's number three with OPS.
in
Babe Ruth and Lou
postseason?
Gehrig are above him. That's it.
Yeah, I saw what I did is I went to 200 postseason at bats and more because
Yep.
those guys didn't have as many games. Harper has the
Sure.
highest rated runs created plus 174. But yeah, you go down to 150, then it's Gehrig is above him and George Brett's above him.
George
But
Brett.
he doesn't
Wow.
have a ring though, right? He left those net.
No.
He doesn't have a ring. So I mean it's a team sport. I get it. But my point is I think long lineups win,
Yeah.
right? And like honestly, in the Phillies, I haven't been scared of JT Realmuto in a while. I had him in fantasy. I don't know what happened, but Bryson Stott came through. So like it's those guys. And for the Mets, can the JD Martinez, Jesse Winker, platoon, Starling Marte, Alvarez, like, look, that's two full innings of at bats, 5 to 9, 4 to 9. So like I think the tops of the lineups, but it's the bottom of the lineups. Whoever comes through, I think they take it.
That is
So
a
we'll
good
see.
call. I do think the bottom of the lineups are where, you give guys on in the bottom, sets up the top of the lineup to make some more damage. So
Yeah, more at
good
bats.
call there.
So we'll see. I know we're running out of time. The last thing I'll leave you with, the Mets have never lost in the division series. They're 4-0. 99, 2000, 2006, 2015. 2022 was a wild card. They're 4-0. So I mean that's going home 1-1. I'm feeling pretty good. How are you feeling?
I feel anxiety. Like that's the way that the Philadelphia Phillies sports fan is. I'm excited for the games. I think they're going to be great baseball games. I do feel a lot of anxiety around how are they going to go? How are they going to play? The next two pitching matchups for the Phillies are awesome, but yeah, it's full of anxiety here for me.
Yeah. Well, let's enjoy it, man. Hey, I appreciate you coming on. Good to talk maturely about this with you. Let's enjoy the games.
Let's go, Phils.
Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's not Mets it up. All right, buddy. Thanks so much.
All right, take care, bud.
All right, later.
Bye.
All right. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Looking for something to listen to next. If you haven't listened to my last episode titled Believe, I got spiritual talking about these Mets. Baseball playoffs are the best. Enjoy. Keep sharing it around. Share this podcast around. Take care. Have a great day.